During all the woodworking I've been doing while working on the deck screens and Marty's loft, it occurred to me that it's taken me a long time to get good at planing lumber. That being the case, I figured it wouldn't hurt to share a few things that I've learned over the past 20 years since getting into woodworking at the end of my college days. This may seem silly to the uninitiated. It's just running some wood through a machine, right? The reality is that planing, like any other woodworking procedure, has its subtleties that must be learned and navigated. Much of this comes from experience, but some of it can be internalized by learning from others. First, you need to develop a way to know which sides you've planed and which you haven't. When you first begin planing a board, the first few passes are easy to tell. But the closer you get to finished, the harder it is. I repeat 3 words in my head in the same order each time. Flip, plane, place. This is the order in which I take the steps. I pick up the board that needs to be planed, and I flip it over. Then I plane it, and when it comes out of the planer, I place it in the pile in the same orientation that it came out. Then, when I've got through the entire pile and lowered the planer deck 1 turn, I know every board in the pile needs to be flipped if I want to plane the side that wasn't just planed. Flip, plane, place. I say this in my head less now that I've got some experience and it's just become my habit. But when I first realized that I needed a system, I literally set it for every single board I planed, and I did this for years. This gouge at the end of the board is called snipe. I found it happens more easily the longer the board you're planing. Essentially, it happens when the rollers inside the planer cannot counter the weight of the board that hasn't yet come onto the planer table, and the board is tipping up as it enters the planing area. The best way to combat this, if you can't plane a shorter board, is to apply extra pressure to the board as it enters the planer area. Next, be sure to use the material removal gauge. In order to use this gauge, you need to have material enter the planing area beneath the yellow arrow. If you don't, the gauge will not move. I don't use this by keeping a close eye on the measurement to see exactly how much is being removed. Rather, I keep an eye on the red arrow relative to the bottom of the gauge. You want it to be as close as possible. A good way to ensure this happens is to make sure you make small turns when you adjust the planer downward, i.e., don't take off too much material with each pass. 1/32 of an inch is about what I take off in a single pass. Any more than that, and your planer is working too hard. Take the time to plane slowly. You'll definitely get better result. When I get down to the last pass, I throw out my flip, plane, place mantra in favor of planing the side that needs the most attention. Take a close look at each board. If there's still any deformity that you think could be removed, even if you just plane that side, go ahead and plane it again. It's much easier and quicker to remove material with a planer than it is to do it with this piece of sandpaper. Finally, when you're homesteading, you sometimes get called away from a project before you can finish it, and it can sometimes be quite a while before you return. If you'll need to plane again another day, it's a good idea to have a story stick that is the finished thickness of your project. That way, when you come back to the project and you need to plane some rough lumber from scratch, you'll know how thick the finished piece needs to be, and you can count back the number of turns you raise the planer deck to get the lumber through for the first pass. I've found this to be more consistent than using the thickness gauge on the planer, mostly because with my planer, the lines are so close together that it's difficult for me to see what the finished measurement is. If, however, I go up 8 half turns, I know I need to send this board through the planer 8 times to get it down to the finished thickness of my storyboard. Be sure to label your board and keep it in a place that does not look anything like your firewood pile.